Hello, everyone, and good morning. Welcome to the GSC UK Virtual Conference 2023. This is session 9G. And with us, we have Dave Clitheroe from IBM UK, and he will be talking about what's new with GDPS, recent GDPS enhancements to improve your CA and DR and cyber resilience capabilities. If you have any questions whilst during the presentation, please feel free to ask them. You can raise your questions in the chat box or interrupt Dave and ask them verbally. Thank you. Dave, the floor is yours.
Okay, great. I'm going to avoid distractions, I'm going to turn my video off. You've all seen me now. So welcome everybody. This is a revisit of a session I gave at Whittlebury back in November, but there have been some updates. So I will try and highlight those updates when I get to them. So as Rui kindly introduced, my name is Dave Clitheroe. I work in IBM in the UK. I'm part of the IBM infrastructure group, or IBM systems as we used to be called, and I'm the GDPS offering manager for everybody, really, for the globe. And this session will look at kind of what's new. It's a potpourri of new capabilities within GDPS. I will, as I say, try and highlight things where they're in the base of what was 4.5, which was released at the end of March last year. And also we'll talk about changes that have been introduced via the service stream. Some of those are also applicable to 4.4 as well as 4.5. And who knows, as we're rapidly approaching the end of the first quarter, there may be a few hints about what might be coming in 4.6 as well, which will be the next release, which will be made available at the end of March. I don't intend spending much time on that, but otherwise we won't have anything to talk about at the next conference. But there may be some hints. All right, so let's crack on. Let's see if I can manage to navigate the slides without things moving too quickly for everybody. Right, so new features and functions, as I mentioned, it is an update. I think we've covered that, and I'll also, right at the very end, assuming we've got some time, I will spend one chart just describing to you the whys and wherefores of how we do things in terms of what is it that we decide to work on when continually developing the GDPS solutions to meet your requirements. Obviously, client requirements are a large portion of that, but also there's trends or directions which are influencing how we do things, and so I've got one slide which describes that process to you a little bit as well. So first and foremost, what are the key migration considerations when moving to 4.5? You may recall, for those of you who've been using GDPS for some time, we had a little blip in the road, I think is the way to describe it, a little disturbance around the transition from version 3 to version 4, which meant that we couldn't have N and N-1 coexistence. But since then, we have enabled and made available and continue to test this N and N-1 coexistence. So when a new release of GDPS comes out, we do test it in a mixed configuration, whether that's GDPS Metro with different systems in the Sysplex at different levels, and also a GDPS GM solution where the GM solution, the KG and KR are at different levels, or an MGM solution where they're likewise a mixed, and MZGM for that matter, for those of you who are using MZGM. It is only N and N-1, so we don't support 4.5 with 4.3 in the same environment, but we do support 4.5 with 4.4. And we will, of course, support 4.6 with 4.5 when that comes out. Whilst we're talking about support, again, at this time of year, we are rapidly approaching the end of support for one of our currently supported releases. So 4.5, 4.4 and 4.3 are the currently supported GDPS releases. At the end of March, when 4.6 comes out, it replaces 4.5 at the top of the list, and 4.3 drops off out of support. That may be hopefully not new news to anybody, but obviously if you need an extended support agreement, we do offer those for people who are unable to get off an out of what would become an out of support release in a timely fashion. And so we support N and N-2 when it comes to support, but only N and N-1 when it comes to coexistence. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. The other migration feature for 4.5 is a fairly big change in that the Geoplex domains have been removed from the user entry type pairs within the SA policy. Over the past few years, we have been gradually removing pieces of policy from the SA policy and putting them into our own XML format files. And this release with 4.5 kind of completes that activity insofar as the Geoplex domains definitions are now gone. So you do not have Geoplex domains in your SA policy anymore. But we do provide a tool which can be used to migrate your existing definitions into what will hold the new definitions, which are in GeoGroup, and more on that as we go through this session. And I don't know why my cursor is doing strange things, but let me roll that up. Okay, so what have we done in 4.5? And some of them, as I mentioned, are SPEA paths, both on 4.5 and 4.4 in some cases. Another new function that was introduced in 4.5 is something called the GDPS Enterprise Portal. We've been talking about something like this for quite some time now. And we've once called it multi-Sysplex manager or multi-GDPS manager, and it's gone through various different names, but we've landed now on the GDPS Enterprise Portal, which allows you to, via the web UI effectively, or via a web UI, provide a single pane of glass that can display all of your GDPS environments if you have multiple. Obviously, if you've only got one, it's maybe not such a big deal, but some of our clients have got many GDPS environments, sometimes of different type, and certainly for different lines of business or different purposes. So there has been a drive to have a portal type action to consolidate the view down onto a single pane of glass and allow you to drill down from that portal into each individual environment. We have two different types of view available via the portal. One is a logical view of your systems within the GDPS environment. And the other view is a physical view, which is more hardware orientated, showing the KEX, the disk subsystems and things of that nature. And we've got a couple of examples coming up on the next few charts. The connection is all through GeoGroup, and it gives you easy access to all the different GDPS controlling systems from a single point of control, if that's what you want to achieve. And you use one of your existing GDPS environments as kind of like the owner of the portal in that sense, and it's through your existing controlling systems that you get to view the portal itself. All right, so this is really annoying me now. So here's an example of the logical view. Each GDPS, as it's defined, comes as a twisty that you can open and get more information. So this, as I say, is the logical view. Here we have an MGM foresight configuration, and you have, in this case, the mirroring is kind of in reverse. So the current production is in region A. You can see all the systems. You can hover over the links. It will pop up information as is true also through the graphical user interface, and get information or status information. Oh, sorry, let's go back. of the environment. Obviously, the color coding of systems gives you some idea of systems that are up versus systems that are down. From that you can drill, and also as I say, you can drill down by right-clicking on these, getting more information, and you can launch the GUI to a controlling system from within the enterprise portal. You can, as I say, you can get information about a system. This is the physical view. You get to see the hardware layout, you get to see the different processors, the different subsystems. Again, you can hover and click on things to get greater detail. And one enhancement that's come out since Whittlebury is that we will now give you visualization of the STP status. So whether you're an arbiter, whether you're the current time server and whatever is displayed next to the KEX on this physical view. Okay, so that's the enterprise portal, a new simplified interface for accessing multiple GDPS environments, if that's something that you have value for or indeed need. Another key, and you can't really have missed this if you've been to any conference recently or read anything certainly in the trade press. Cyber resiliency is kind of a big topic at the moment, and GDPS logical corruption protection, or LCP, is a key focus area. One of those things that's on that slide that I mentioned about drivers and what we're trying to achieve. And so there are a number of enhancements that have been made around the logical corruption protection capability within GDPS, and I'm just going to summarize a few here. We'll talk about a few SPEs later on in this session as well. So this is the different topologies for which GDPS supports. The update here since November is right at the end of the year, we introduced an APAR which provided the support for virtual isolation LCP in an MGM 4-site configuration on the metro mirror leg in the production region. That wasn't previously allowed. Those which are not allowed and are currently not supported, it's a case of they've not been through a test cycle, and there is some blocking in the code to disallow them. But otherwise, it's really the code is kind of there. We just need to get it through the test process and make sure it's fit for purpose to release to the world. And work will continue on that as we go forward. Some other enhancements, this is kind of a summary. We now have incremental restore to production. That's available for both Metro and GM and a number of the MGM solutions. And that's really one of the big items. Also, it's in conjunction with the 9.2 DS8000 microcode. And it came out initially for back end of 2021, to be fair, but it was in the 4.4, 4.5 timeframe. So it's worth just mentioning here that it is available, and it means that through a GDPS script statement, we will incrementally copy back from a recovered capture in your LCP environment over to back to production in the event of a catastrophic corruption event. We've introduced capacity reporting within the GDPS UI, and it can give you information on the DS8000 storage pool statistics, also the virtual capacity usage, and we detect any roll-offs that have taken place in the DS8000, and they are visible via the UI as well. Extended the different topology support. So for clients who are running a GM2 site physical isolation topology, that's now fully supported as well. And a whole host of other things that you see here. Some of them are security related. So we've introduced role-based security. That's quite a key extension of the GDPS role-based security, which we continue to evolve to enable you to give greater granularity to the security of the different options within LCP in this instance. So you can have people who can only do view information. You can have people who can also carry out more significant actions as well, and define them appropriately. Okay, there's nothing too startling there. Okay, so moving on, GDPS Metro. We tend to cover GDPS Metro first in these What's New presentations because firstly, it's the most widely adopted solution of GDPS. More than 50% of the GDPS community have GDPS Metro, but also because it is a common code base that's shared with all the different GDPS solutions. And as such, we kind of talk about it in the GDPS Metro context. And then when we get to the GDPS Global Mirror context or MGM context, we can just simply say same here, as we talked about in GDPS Metro. So, we had to pick one, and we picked GDPS Metro to talk about first, as I say, largely because it's the most commonly adopted solution. I've already mentioned that the Geoplex domains are being moved to GeoGroup instead of the SA policy, and I've got a few more charts on that, an actual migration process, and this GDPS MIG command is the key here, and it's good at being able to translate your existing Geoplex domains into the new format. The GDPS role-based security, the GDPS control tree has been extended to cover not only standard actions, which was first released a little while ago, but now also all the main panel options. So you can allow people to have different capabilities within the panels. And we've also provided a command to aid in understanding what security resource definitions may be missing if you implement this and find that you can't get to anything. The GDPS auth command will give you a message effectively to give you an idea of what resources you need to be defined to in order to carry out what it is you're trying to achieve. A number of RAS enhancements. We always do this in every release. GDPS is now coming up on 25 years in the market, and therefore there's always opportunities for improvement in some of our key modules. So we do look at our technical debt to understand what benefit for everybody there is in opening Pandora's box to some extent and looking to rewrite elements of or parts of GDPS to improve the performance or the reliability and so on. Over time, things get patched and repatched, and it just gets more complex. So we look to do this on some of our more important code. One of the things we've also introduced in this in the RAS sphere is when you start or restart the GeoXCFST task, and we have a palm equals cold, which forces a rebuild of the GDPS control block in memory. This was kind of in response to support calls which were coming in during upgrade events, which resulted in some mismatch in the control block version. This just was a nice way of resolving that. You don't have to start with palm equals cold all the time. That's not a requirement by any stretch of the imagination. But if you do run into this mismatch condition, there's now an easy way around it. Another thing that's changed is that when you perform an INGAMS refresh in system automation, so you're refreshing your SA policy, that will only redrive GDPS initialization if any of the resources associated with GDPS in the policy, which are now significantly less than there were, are changed. So it will be less disruptive to GDPS carrying out automation refreshes for your normal, let's say, business purposes, which is a good thing, and indeed one of the drivers for why we've been moving GDPS definitions out of the SA policy over time. And we'll see on a chart later on, there's some enhanced copy services error reporting. It's not a big deal, but it's quite nice to be able to now translate some previously untranslatable messages into human readable text rather than sense codes and so on. Another item introduced in 4.5, and this was quite a nice item based on client feedback, is the dynamic PPRC link management. Prior to 4.5, link management was a fairly static affair. If you wanted to change them, you had to change them in your GeoPalm. You had to then perform a config. Performing a config is somewhat disruptive. And then you still had to carry out an action in the panel in order to establish links if you'd added ones, or establish it again if you would remove ones in order for that to take place. We can now do all of these things through a panel interface without having to disrupt the config process. Obviously, if you're making permanent changes to your link configuration, then you may want to update your GeoPalm to reflect those permanent changes. Think of it, somewhat akin to Palmlib updates that you can make dynamically, but then you need to harden in order for an IPL to not lose them. Here, it's a case of you want them to be hardened for the next GDPS config rather than then having to dynamically make the change again. So very useful, helps in making timely operational changes to your GDPS environment, particularly if you've got an infrastructure cross-site, for example, that's maybe not as robust as it could be, or is showing signs that some directors are having issues on some ports. We also tend to improve the health checks on each release, and this is no difference here with 4.5. And we've introduced changes to the check config and check report checks. The driver here was around ensuring or raising exceptions if there is an indication that you're wanting to use consistent read from secondary capability within the hardware and software infrastructure. That in order to do that, you have to have consistent definitions everywhere. So we will now check that those definitions have been made consistently and raise an exception if not. That is true for GDPS Metro within the context of the GDPS Sysplex. It does not apply to any ZOS proxy managed guest systems. Another little tricky thing that cropped up on a number of occasions with clients, more so in the MGM Foresight world, possibly when performing region switches, but could happen in any environment, is this outboard copy inhibit bit being set, typically due to some form of disk migration activity that might have failed and therefore left a copy inhibit bit set when it shouldn't be. We will now detect those and then gives you, awareness so you can clear it before it may become a problem down the line, for example, when performing a region switch. I found out the other day that although we declared this was a 4.5 item, it may not be fully out there yet, but the GDPS Sysplex stop processing is intended to be parallelized for your XDR managed systems, as well as with your ZOS systems. So when you're stopping site, if that site includes XDR managed systems, they should all be stopping in parallel rather than serially. We have code in there now to automatically refresh the HMC certificate for the secure service container if you're running that for the DB2 Analytics Accelerator. We've also done some work to show how Red Hat Open Container Platform, or OpenShift Container Platform, I should say, works within a GDPS context, and we provide support for the master and worker nodes as ZVM guests with GDPS. And this is an area that we're, again, one of the areas that we are focusing on as the whole industry is moving towards a hybrid cloud kind of infrastructure. It's more important that we extend GDPS's capabilities to work in this space. A small enhancement for the GDPS GUI, again around the security line items, is around the use of SSL certificates rather than having to provide user ID and passwords. Particularly important, I think, around use of the REST API and indeed the GUI, but more so possibly with the REST API. And the last item on this chart, it's not really a new feature or function, it was just something that we had not really recommended significantly in the past, but we've come to the realization, due to some issues at a number of clients where they had over-defined channel paths from the controlling systems down to the disk. You don't need to, and we actually recommend that you don't over-define the number of channel paths from your controlling system LPARs to your disk. Indeed, have two, definitely, for redundancy, but if you over-define and go up to 8 or whatever, it increases the work that the controlling system's got to do, because whenever there is a device state change, it comes back over every established path. And if your controlling system is underfed, which I know is a tendency in the marketplace, because these things aren't important, are they? We can take resources away from the GDPS controlling system or not give them much in the first place. And yeah, they'll run, but they may run suboptimally, and therefore when you find it needs to actually do something in anger, it doesn't have enough horsepower to do it, and you can end up in timeout situations when processing copy services commands. Or in the worst case, we have seen some instances where they've been so poorly fed that a hyperswap can time out during its, an unplanned hyperswap timeout during the swap, and that's really not a good place to go. So don't over-define channel paths from your controlling systems down to your disk, but also somewhat veiled in there, but don't under-provision processor capacity for your controlling systems. Moving on, GDPS, Global Mirror and MGM highlights. Obviously, they pick up all of the common code items from Metro, such as the GeoPlex domains restructure and moving that into GeoGroup. They pick up the RAS enhancements around the enhanced copy services error reporting. We've introduced role-based security for GDPS Global Mirror, both for the main menu, for standard actions, and for LCP. And really, just to highlight that in 4.4, we did announce initially that that fixed block devices were not supported. They have been supported via an APAR that came out late in 2021. Okay, so we can support fixed block in GM2 site environments. The other key thing in 4.4 was we moved away from the old GeoMPARM format for the GM2 site environments and adopted the newer XML format GeoPalm. That was already in place for Metro and indeed MGM clients. So if you're using GM in an MGM context, you were coding your disk configuration one way, whereas if you had a GM2 site, we're coding it in a different way, and it kind of didn't make sense. And so we've all now adopted the same XML structure for the GeoPalm definitions. Minor enhancement for the secure service container. We have introduced something called the multi-node deployment. This is a DB2 Analytics Accelerator term, and that's supported by GDPS. The GDPS agent runs on the Analytics Accelerator and connects back to the GDPS controlling systems in order to manage that environment. Another change is the procedure handler exception check report. So prior to running some major activities such as region switches, we recommend that you run the exception check report. And that will now also check this outboard copy inhibit related alert to see if there are any, and it will highlight that to you again, so you can resolve it before it becomes a problem, possibly during the actual execution of that region switch event. Okay, so that's Metro and GM highlights. XRC highlights, as for those who don't know and maybe have been, I don't know, dozing for the last couple of years, we've been saying now for that period of time that XRC is going to go away. It's not gone away yet, but GDPS XRC and MZGM from an XRC perspective are functionally stabilized. So again, where they share code with GDPS Metro and the other solutions, they will pick up those new enhancements, such as migration of Geoplex domains to GeoGroup. But we are not enhancing the ZOS Global Mirror management functionality. That is stabilized, and that's on the back of the fact that both the DS8000 and ZOS announcements that their follow-on products from those which are currently in the market will not have support for XRC. We will continue to support our XRC clients for as long as they are running XRC, but obviously if you want to migrate to whatever comes after ZOS 2.5, or indeed whatever comes after the DS89XX series, you will have to look to migrate. And I know some of you are already in that process, some have already completed that. We have one major client who's migrating this coming weekend over in the US as they complete their journey into MGM. We have enhanced the documentation that we provide, and for the migration, it's there for MZGM3 site to MGM3 site, and also for it is now available, and this was another update for the MZGM4 site to MGM4 site migrations. We would always recommend that you're on the latest levels prior to carrying out that migration. Okay, what else is going on? GDPS CA continues to be enhanced. The highlights in 4.5 is extensions to the GDPS routing switch command, and that's an extension for vSAN workloads. It was there for DB2 and IMS workloads previously, and it's now, as I said, been extended for vSAN workloads. And CA, like the other solutions, picks up this change from of extracting the Geoplex domains information out of the SA policy into the GeoGroup member. There were some other 4.4 enhancements that came in via the service stream. They weren't necessarily there at 4.4 GA. I've listed those here for those who may be interested. I'm not going to dwell on them here, but really to highlight, we do continue to extend the GDPS CA capabilities if it is a solution that meets your requirements. Okay, so what else have we done in the 2022 and indeed early 2023 time frame? We have, as I've mentioned already, extended the role-based security. So there's that was the basic role-based security for the panels and for standard actions in the case of GM as well. It's still pending for GDPS CA. We've extended LCP. Again, some of these I have already talked about, but this gives you the APAR numbers associated with those changes. Some of the things we didn't talk about was support for alternate subchannel sets for the GM primaries. If you happen to be running in a Metro 2 site or MM3 site configuration, you probably potentially MGM as well. For MSS1, you may have wanted to exploit alternate subchannel sets, and that was not previously supported, but it is now for the GM primaries. We've extended the capacity reporting and monitoring capability, and we've also extended the different topology supports. And as I said, we've just started rolling out the Virtual isolation for MGM Foresight, that's one of the changes on here from what was there at Whittlebury, and we continue to look towards having a mix of virtual and physical isolation in the same environment too. One of the key areas that we are working on is still with LCP, and what I've got here in quotes is that's what we call the IBM Z Cyber Vault support. We will be looking over the coming weeks and months to release capability to automatically, through GDPS, excuse me, schedule the capture of safeguarded copies, to automatically carry out the recovery of one of those, either one of those safeguarded captures, or indeed to take a flash copy, to provision a point-in-time consistent copy of production, to carry out validation activities against. And we do plan on having what we're describing as a GDPS agent that will run in your system being validated, that can report back to GDPS in LCP, and we can flag that time, and therefore all captures taken prior to that time either as good or bad appropriately based on how that validation exercise was carried out. So it's a key area for development for us, and you'll probably hear more about that as this year unfolds, and we put more structure around what the IBM Z Cyber Vault solution will do in terms of automating capability that's there, today if you do it manually, but as we wrapper that into an automation solution. ZVM 7.3 was made available, and we obviously needed to ensure that we provided support for 7.3 and indeed the extension to an 8-way SSI support, and that support has been delivered by the APAR mentioned there. And likewise, in the last 9 months or so, we've introduced the Z16, and we have naturally needed to ensure that we support capabilities in the Z16 around system recovery boost. So there's extensions there for loading the GDPS configuration during Hyperswap prepare. You'll get a quick, short 2-minute boost to ensure that that can take place without stealing cycles from your production workload. Also enhancements around BCPII suspend resume activities, and there's 2 APARs mentioned there. One of those, the 48585, is relatively new, but it gives you, greater information through the CPC operations panel in GDPS to be able to manage your environment. And then we also have the ability to manage the flexible capacity records which came out for the Z16. So this is a new type of temporary capacity record called a flex record. Initially, the support was introduced to support them as a type of other because there was some handshaking that wasn't quite working right between us and the hardware, but now they are showing as a flex record rather than to differentiate them from CVU or on-off capacity on demand and so on. Okay. All right, whoops, let me go back. So there is a couple of questions in the chat. I see Phil's asking whether dynamic PPRC link management is included with GDPS Global. At this time, the answer to that, Phil, is no. I'm sorry, it is not. I will, however, pass that on to development to maybe chivvy them along and get that on the books for delivery. In terms of the case system recommendation, how many is too many? Well, 2 is good. 4 is more than 2. 6 is even worse, and 8 is certainly you want to steer away from. So if you can stay with 2, stay with 2 is the simple answer to the question that's asked in the chat. Okay, that's those taken care of. Well, that's gone a bit too far. Right, so restore to production, fairly simple graphic. Prior to the support that we brought out in the last 12 months, it did require a full copy back from your safeguarded backup via the recovery copy into your production environment. With the relevant code on the DS8000 and in GDPS, that is now done incrementally because we preserve information about the data that has changed overall in the relationships between RS1 to RS2 and then RS2 through to the backups and so on. And we through the smarts in the DS8000 and processing done by GDPS, that's now an incremental copy back to production. Obviously, if everything is corrupted, everything would have to be copied back. So it doesn't necessarily mean it won't be a significant amount of data being copied back, but this can make it less data if that's possible. The reporting, as I mentioned, we get the storage pool capacity information now on the GDPS. We've also introduced the capability, or we're about to, whereby if you want to dynamically increase, I think we have rolled this out. If you want to increase your virtual capacity, you can use GDPS to determine what needs to be done, and GDPS can build for you the commands that need to be then issued through the DS8000 to expand the virtual capacity for the volumes. Okay, so that's quite a neat capability that we've introduced as well. So a bit more about our GeoPlex domains migration to GeoGroup. As I've mentioned, it's been a journey. We've gradually been reducing the reliance upon the SA policy to hold those definitions for a number of pretty good reasons, not least the separation of duties between automation teams and GDPS people who maybe had different ideas about when they needed to make changes and things of that nature. For that, one of the things that we don't really show here is the GeoPalm up in the top left of the list. When I started with GDPS, that also used to be in the UET pairs, and it was an absolute nightmare. Thankfully, that got taken out of the UET pairs fairly early in GDPS's life. But this is a trend that's gone on for, as I say, a number of years, and we made a concerted effort with version 4 of GDPS to start to strip out the reliance on the SA policy for the GDPS definitions for a number of pretty good reasons. One of which was whenever you do a GDPS initialization to change a simple script thing, you're going to be disabling hyperswap for a period of time. That's not a good thing. So having all of this now being able to take place more dynamically with more straightforward management through an XML format file, which you can have loaded in the GUI to make it easy to define, to edit and change and everything, or you can obviously do it in 3270 still as well. But you're not having to deal with the SA policy and maybe disrupting other automation changes that need to go on in the environment. Simple enough flow of what needs to be done. This GDPS MIG command, domains command, it will extract the information either from your KP systems, your KG systems, or both, if that's necessary, and excuse me, massage that and build the GeoGroup definitions into a member, and it will copy your existing GeoGroup definition, so it builds a complete member, not just for the bits that this process creates, which you can then also test to validate that the environment looks okay. And once you've got your member created, you will then go through this process in 4.5. When you initialize it, you start your alternate controlling system first in 4.5. You then restart the master controlling system in 4.5, and then restart your production systems. So this is the process you'd have to go through, and that's the recommended process that we describe for GDPS anyway when upgrading to a new release. Anything of note here? The command is there, the APAR is there. The APAR goes back to 4.3, I believe. If you're having to jump a release, you can still take make benefit of the GeoGroup of the migrate command. how you specify it, you point it at a member, don't point it at your existing geo group. That would be silly. Point it at a new member, and then you can obviously do a test against that and look at it and make sure you're comfortable. It may well use some some names that you're not that keen on, so you may want to change a few things in that member if that's appropriate for your environment. You do have to have the geo RMT alt RMT defined in your environment in order to use the GDPS MIG command. And as I say, we build these with some default names, but you can go in and change those. Note is that the partner element definitions are no longer required within your geo group, and you need to remove those as part of this process. This gives you some idea of the syntax of the geo group definition. I'm not going to go through the syntax. It would be we could be here a while if I was going to do that. So some more usage notes for when you get there. It seems to work is all I can say. I've run a couple of classes now on GDPS 4.5, and we've had no real problems with the students getting to grips with defining the geo group and indeed running with GDPS in that manner. So we have a question. Does the migration of geoplex domains need to happen in one change slot? You can have a mixed environment. Yeah, so Kevin, as I mentioned at the start, we do support N and N-1. Obviously, if you when you migrate your alternate controlling system first, your sysplex is still running on the old definitions because your master controlling system is running on the old definitions. You then upgrade the master to 4.5, and the master will then be using its geo group along with the alternate controlling systems, and then you roll out production as you need to. We never recommend running for long periods of time in a mixed configuration, but it does not have to be done in the same change slot. Even though I might personally recommend you don't spend months in a mixed configuration. We don't test for months in a mixed configuration. Our resources are such that we will test it in the mixed configuration, but then we move on to test it in a 4.5, for example, only environment. Okay, so the link management.
Sorry, Dave. Sorry to interrupt you. There's further up. There's also a question on the chat box around the restart master cases.
I'd have to check the manual. I should be normally we say alternate first and then the master.
Okay, thank you.
And let me see, Simon's got a slightly different question, but now I thought I might. No, well, let me check. I will check. It should say alternate and then master. That is the recommended approach. Okay, so the link management. As I mentioned, replacing a bad link before was a config change. When you did the config option, Hyperswap was disabled for that period until monitor 2 completed and Hyperswap got enabled again. Okay, Paul, understood. My advice, alternate first. The new environment allows you to make these changes using the panel. So within 3270 or indeed through the UI, you can now remove, add or change the link configuration, link definitions to GDPS within that, dynamically within that panel. And this got some good reviews when discussing it back in November. Of course, I'll go to the chat. You can do it on a temporary basis. Obviously, if you're going to do it permanently, we do recommend that you update your GeoPalm at an appropriate time. But you can obviously make these changes dynamically without having to go through that config process. You can also identify unexpected links. Maybe there's been some migration work and you've got some links still defined to some old boxes, or you're moving things around, migrating LSSs between different environments. If that's the sort of thing you do, this can help understand whether or not you've got links that you should no longer have in that configuration. This is just an example of the GUI panel. It wasn't meant to be picked that everything was red on it, but here you've got a good example of seeing what the different state of the paths may be. Obviously, we have three different categories of links now. We have permanent links. Those are the ones that are defined in your GeoPalm. You have the temporary links, the ones that aren't in GeoPalm, but you've added them through this new interface. And then we'll also detect these ones that are not managed by GDPS and not supposed to be there. So these were established outside of GDPS's control, and you can have awareness that they exist and take necessary action. The copy services error reporting, fairly minor change, but we can now translate the error conditions for the 0fox52 and 0fox13 error codes that could occur during some PPRC commands. They now get translated into human readable format rather than machine readable format. In this example, we get an error descriptor code of 17, which tells you that the volume cannot be a PPRC secondary because it's either in a current copy or XRC session, which is maybe more useful than just seeing an error code in a message. There are some ZOS APARs that are needed in order to enable this support, because obviously they're passing us more information than they used to do, which enables us to translate this data. And you do get this error report in your netlog to interrogate. The outboard copy inhibit. During monitor 2, we check for the condition and we'll raise an alert if we find that there are devices with the outboard copy inhibit bit set. And it allows you to be aware of it and then take remedial action rather than having a problem, for example, as I mentioned, during a region switch in an MGM4 site configuration, which is where we've typically seen this being an issue. We also recommend running this exception check report, as I mentioned, which will also highlight any of these alerts outstanding. Typically, it's set by disk migration tools such as TDMF. Others do exist, but it didn't necessarily remove the outboard copy inhibit bit when it failed or whatever occurred. But you can use a utility that TDMF provides, or use the DSQD command with the allowfc option to clear those bits. But as I say, our support here is awareness rather than fixing it, but at least being aware and having the tools on hand to go fix it, you could do so. The health check update. As I say, we're checking for this consistent read management enablement, and that you are consistently defining those parameters required in order to enable this functionality. If you've got read sec equals no set in your palms, then obviously we're not going to raise an exception because you're not looking to use it. But if you have read sec equals yes, and you've got ZHPF enabled in your EC iOS, we will go around and make sure that everybody's got a consistent view. If not, we will raise an exception. This is in check config. Check config only runs once an hour. So we have somewhat, you might see it as slightly strange, but what we've done is we've actually enhanced the check report check, which runs on a 5-minute basis. And if we detect that those values have changed, and we do that by some control block management in our environment, we will then drive the routine of the check config in order to update the situation on a more frequent basis. So again, giving you more timely awareness of the situation. REST API has been updated, so we've now got version 2 of the REST API. The version 1 calls are still there, they still work, but the version 2 give you greater consistency, I think is the best way to describe it, and also extended to include the new link management. So you can now, through the REST API, look at the, extract information about the link definitions and indeed carry out tasks. So link management has got get, put, post, and delete information available to you through the API, so you can manipulate those from your own dashboards if indeed you are looking to exploit the REST API for that purposes. The role-based security, as I say, we're gradually rolling this out into GDPS to give you better granularity of your management of security in the environment. For example, you can have users who can do anything, do everything. You can have people who can only view things or maybe can't do some things. You can get down to, user so-and-so could only IPL, one particular image in one particular sysplex, if you want to get down to that level of granularity. Okay, which I think gives you a greater flexibility with the security definitions, rather than anybody who's got access to GDPS can do anything, which was seen as a bit of an open door by some people. As I mentioned, this is what's kind of available. We had the standard actions first in Metro. We then introduced the main panel and support in Metro. We then extended that for all Metro and global solutions out, or global mirror solutions out to main panel, standard actions, and LCP. And we've got this GDPS auth command 2 that's now fully available. So gradually we are introducing more. We will be, we are looking at doing the disk related actions next, or the DASD control tree as we describe it, which will obviously give greater granularity on the disk replication management within GDPS. In LCP, and this kind of is here as for you to read. Basically, we break down the actions into what we call pervasive and non-pervasive. So if you're just looking at things, they're kind of non-pervasive, but also taking a capture could be considered as non-pervasive. But if you're creating things or changing things, then we consider those to be pervasive, and therefore you can't, you can separate based on these types of definitions. It is multi-tiered, so you've got to have access to both the action and the environment in order to be able to get the security that you need. Here's a very simple example, or a flow chart, really. You've got your user profile. If you've got a UAC of none, then you're not going to get anywhere. If you've got a UAC of read, if the action is pervasive, again, you're not going to get anywhere. But if you've got a UAC of alter, then you could potentially get to the first stage, but then it's what is it you're trying to do next? If you then can't do what it is you're trying to do, again, you go through the second level of checking in effect. So we've got a planned action scripts are not protected yet within role-based security. That is a true statement, Phil. Yes, scripts are not yet protected, but they will be. That's again on the list. And again, so just visualizing this even more, you've got user 1 has got a UAC of read to LCP control, user.a1, so he can't do anything. User 2 has got alter, but he's got a read on this gold profile, and therefore he can't do anything. Whereas user 3 has got UAC of alter and UAC of alter on the gold profile, so he can go in and make the changes necessary to update that profile. So it's kind of, as I say, a 2-level structure, one for the the environment and one for the actual object itself. Right. As we're coming to very much the end, these are the themes that we pick up in GDPS. Hardware synergy is obviously one, so the Z16 stuff, anything new on the DS8000 front. Our simplification and usability enhancements. Example of that is the portal. Another example is the REST API, the GUI, and the wizards that we've got through the GUI around editing some of these XML members, plus also in the next release, we're looking at introducing a disk migration utility within GDPS, which will be the first step towards simplifying that process. LCP and the IBM Z CyberVault extensions are the next key category in which we are driving a new capability. And then finally, around the GDPS security and auditability, such as extension of the role-based security to the disk and indeed scripts and other actions within GDPS. That is what I had planned to cover. As like there'll be any time left. Obviously, we've picked up a couple of questions. Paul, the recommendation is to do the alternate controlling system first and then the master controlling system, okay, for your Geoplex domains. Are there any other questions? If not, I'm sure you've got other things, other sessions to go to. I don't know how breaks are being managed during this virtual conference, but I apologize for running a couple of minutes over. Any other questions?
So Dave, thank you very much for this presentation, very insightful. Guys, if there are any other questions, you can either raise them and write them on the meeting chat box, or alternatively, you can unmute yourselves and ask the question. Going once. Going twice.
Hey, this is Phil.
There you go.
Hello.
Hey, Phil.
Yeah, hi. Sorry to keep asking questions, but this was kind of important recently for us.
Feel free.
So we're GDPS Global, and we converted to 4.5 recently, and we also do region switch. My understanding, and I wasn't directly involved, but my understanding was that to convert our GOM parms to XML, they have to, the conversion tool that's provided has to be run from a running KG system, as opposed to like reading the data set directly. It actually, I guess, reads it in memory, if that's
it's
true.
Reading what's actually loaded.
Yeah. So when we're doing a region switch, obviously we're at the other site as the primary site, but the region switch is actually the first time you ever come up with that new XML. So we had several issues getting through that process because we never had the opportunity to really run the tool on a running KG, that from what was formerly the secondary site. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. So the immediate thought was when you created your A to B GeoPalm from the A to B running environment, would that not have been quite straightforward to flip?
Well, I think the problem is twofold. One is the person doing it was expecting to have the ability to, run the tool, and it wouldn't require that the config was loaded. Maybe would just read the data set, the GeoParm concatenation, whatever. But the other one is that debugging XML is not always that easy.
I understand. Yeah, I mean, the reason we use it in storage is that obviously the member may have been changed since the config was done.
Right. Yeah, I understand the precision of doing it that way. It was difficult for us to create that XML file when we did the region switch. So I didn't know if that was another alternative. That's all.
I will talk to the creator of the migration tool and see if he's got any ideas.
Okay. I mean, we got through it. He got through it,
Yeah.
but it was
But for others,
painful.
it would be. It could be beneficial for others. I hear you. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you. It was a great presentation.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Phil. Any other questions from anyone? If not, then we can close this chat. Don't forget, our next session will be section 9J later today at 2 p.m. UK time. And we will be covering the modernized business critical applications with latest compilation technologies and how to take advantage of the IBM Z16. So thank you guys, and I hope to see you later. Thank you.
Everybody. Thanks.